I am invisible. Understand. Simply because people refuse to see me. Ralph Ellison.
Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Mentality. It's your boy Gambo, and I have a special guest with me today, Tony. Today, we're going to be discussing the road from college to corporate. What are some of the roadblocks that you can expect as a black professional transitioning from college to corporate? And what are some of the ways that you can help navigate to success? Stay tuned as we chop it up in another interesting episode. All right, welcome back to the show, guys. I'm here today with my man Tony, who is an economic professional who worked in the fintech and insurance industry, and he has actually served as a senior economist for a couple of companies. And so I'm just really glad to have you on the show here today, Tony. How you feeling today, brother?
Thank you, Isaac. I'm feeling very well. How about yourself?
Hey, man, I can't complain, man. You know, it's the holidays and people are relaxing, so just happy to be here. Happy to have an insightful conversation, man.
Yes, I'm happy to be here.
Word. So the conversation we were having today is basically moving from college into corporate. And as black professionals who do so, you know, it's I think it's an interesting road. It's an interesting travel, not even just for black professionals, but I think for all professionals. But of course, as being two black men, speaking from my lens, want to kind of get your perspective on some of the, some of the roadblocks, some of the ups and some of the downs that you've kind of encountered in your way, and what that road and what that journey has been like for you.
Sure. That journey is it's still going.
Word.
As we move into the corporate workspace, it's a never-ending journey where you're always finding new obstacles, especially as a black man. Uh, and then also when you look at what universities you've come from, whether you come from a predominantly white institution or HBCU. Me, I went to Immaculata University,
Mm.
majored in international business with foreign language. I spoke French and Korean when I got to the corporate workspace. Uh, all these different things help benefit me.
Mm. Yeah, that's crazy. I'm kind of glad you got into your background. I was actually going to get to that, but like speaking of which, so you end up going to Korea, right? You lived in Korea for a couple years. Am I getting that correctly?
I lived in Korea for a little over a year back when
Wow.
right after I graduated from college.
Mm.
It was something that I wanted to do, get out of the country, wanted to use my major, wanted to actually do something that I went to school for.
Right.
But that's also why I came back to the States to get into the financial industry, to get into the business side of my degree.
And like real quick, which I know is kind of a segue, but like, what was that experience like? You know, being an American going to Korea, which I'm assuming you didn't really understand the languages like as much. What was that like for you?
That experience is actually one of the best in my life.
Really?
I some days wish that I didn't leave as soon as I did. It was very new to me. I didn't really speak the language, but I was already learning it by the time I got there. I had some friends that introduced me. Uh, Different people out there of the Korean culture,
Mm.
they actually helped me assimilate into the culture very easily
Mm.
by taking me out to different restaurants, teaching me the language through drinking, interact, and then I was also able to interact with other Black people from around the world. Some of my
Right.
my good friends from South Korea were from South Africa, and that was one of the first times I was able to spend different American holidays with people of other countries and see how they interact with me and be able to support some of their holidays as well
Mm.
and experience something new, just as a Black person.
Right. That's dope. So it sounds like it was like an eye-opening experience for you, even though you were like assimilated into a culture that you might not necessarily be all the way familiar with, and also like the language was not, it's sort of a barrier for you, but it sounds like you made the best out of that opportunity. Um, I guess like now let's kind of like delve into your experience moving from I guess like Korea to the U.S. into a more professional route in the States. Like what was that like?
Coming back to the States wasn't that hard of a transition due to me going back home. Moved in with my parents for a short period until I actually got a job here. Went directly into the financial corporate workspace when I got here.
Mm.
It was a very different transition for me because I was going for a role up against multiple people of different backgrounds. whether that be Jewish, female, uh, Brazilian with multiple fluencies,
Mm.
different things like that. I was actually able to achieve my goal of getting that role just through straight hard work, and then management that didn't compare me based on anything other than what they see me produce.
Okay. Interesting.
So to give you a little bit more background on that, I
Yeah, for
also
sure.
started as a temp, as a temporary contract worker,
Okay.
and I was transitioned to full time very shortly afterwards.
So it's interesting because of what you said right there. You said you were given a fair shot based on the results that you were able to produce as a person or as a worker, right? As opposed to
Correct.
like not really considering your background as like a barrier. You really felt that, like you going into a professional space.
Yes, that's how I felt.
Word.
The young lady that trained me and pushed me towards that role,
Mm-hmm.
she was an Indian woman,
Mm-hmm.
and she was the one that also taught me the basics that I needed for the role.
Mm-hmm.
And for me personally, I had to just go in and advance on that. That was something that I had to learn in college to kind of to build up what I already knew.
Okay, so that's really interesting. I say that because I think if you ask a lot of people of color, in their transition into a more professional route from college, it tends to be the opposite of that. And I think that is because of maybe a communication issue. I'm not entirely sure. I think it's because of the cultural differences that people experience when they're in college versus when they go in a professional space. And I think you kind of even alluded to it in the beginning when you mentioned you went to a predominantly white institution. So did I. Versus people who go to
Mhm.
like HBCUs, which are predominantly black colleges. So with that being said, I think the communication styles that are like embedded within those institutions that we kind of are raised in or groomed in rather for the work environment, I think plays a huge
Mhm.
role in like the experience that people have. Do you feel like that's
I,
true or not?
I would agree. I definitely would agree. You said you went to a predominantly white institution as well, right?
Yes,
Where did you
sir.
go?
I went to University of Delaware. It was shouts out University of Delaware. Psych. um,
Newark.
word, yeah, Newark, Delaware, baby. Nah, but it was a good place. I mean, Newark's a good place. The college itself was, obviously predominantly white. I had a good experience. I mean,
Mhm.
I think like anything, there's ups and downs, but I had a good education. It was a you know a pivotal moment in my life, I guess you would call it. I grew a lot. I learned a lot. I met a lot of different people who grew me as a person, and hopefully I was able to inspire people as well. But I think considering the fact that I went to a predominantly white institution, and it's funny when I even say them like that now. When I went to college in Newark, right? The idea behind that was because a lot of people there were so white. I had to kind of assimilate earlier to like that kind of culture. Whereas like
Mhm.
I learned to like, and again, kind of goes back to code switching. I learned to like speak a certain way based on a certain crowd who's around and how to kind of get accepted based on that. Even though you do it like subconsciously, you do these things and you understand that it's ultimately going to determine your success or whatnot. And so like me transitioning into a professional workspace for me personally, I think it might have been a little easier.
Mhm.
But of course, it's not as easy as like maybe other people who have grew up around predominantly white people and grew up around. Maybe I shouldn't even say predominantly white. I should say predominantly like the professional environment kind of environment, which realistically is predominantly white. That's
Mhm.
the culture that we
Yep.
adapt in a corporate space. So that's kind of been my experience, but it's interesting to me that you kind of got an opposite, at least in the beginning. I don't know if that changed in the future for you.
Well, so in the beginning, going into college, I went to Immaculata University. Shout out to them. You know, they so
Yeah.
but yeah, at Immaculata, it was majority white, sprinkle of black people.
Mm-hmm.
It coming from a black and brown high school, that was my transition. So for me to coming from black and brown high school to a predominantly white university, then going into a white workspace, there wasn't much transition from college to corporate when going from a predominantly white institution to another predominantly white institution.
Mm-hmm.
So when I came in, I already felt some type of comfort in knowing what my I don't want to say what my place was, but where I stood. and
Mm.
how to get beyond that. At my university, I learned to push through certain things without making a statement.
Do you know any brothers and sisters from like HBCUs, and like, do you know what their experience has been like? What do you
I know a
think?
few. I know a few people actually that went to HBCUs, and a lot of them are in corporate workspaces, very
Mm.
professional. Somebody that we know mutually, and I've worked with them, and while working with people from these different workspaces, I'm sorry, in these different from these different universities, it did show how people came in being 100% themselves, as you noted earlier, code switching. A
Mm.
lot of people that went to HBCUs either felt one of two ways. One, I need to go in and check out the landscape to see if I can be myself, or two, they came in 100% themselves and didn't really care what their environment felt about it.
What you mean by 100% themselves?
So, let's say, for instance, if you are allowed to dress down in your workspace,
Mm.
but you are from you're from Brooklyn.
All
I'm
right,
from Brooklyn.
right,
Uh,
right.
so if I come into the workspace with some Timbs on,
Shouts out
uh,
to K, baby. Shouts out to K.
coming to work with some Timbs on, I know my coworkers gonna look at me sideways because I'm gonna come in with a Timbs and hoodie. Same thing if I come in with Jordans and some baggy jeans and a Coogee sweater. They're gonna look at me different because their dress down is, hey, let me be business casual. I'm gonna throw on this polo shirt and some slacks, and this is
Mm.
comfortable. But from my background in my space, that's not the case. So if I
Right.
come in at 100% myself, that's gonna start creating barriers for me.
I mean, for sure. I mean, and I think it's interesting that you bring in dress code too. 'Cause I think that's like a more, like, to me, that's been a little bit more clear cut. And I don't even want
Hmm.
to say clear cut because it's unfair. But for me, it's always been like, okay, work is like professional. So like yeah, it's dress down, and I might wear, like, if it's a dress down day, you might want to wear slacks or khakis or jeans or whatever it might be. There's like, I feel like there, and I guess that's why we're having this conversation. The unwritten rules,
Yes,
right? The unwritten
it's
rules
taboo.
of like the in between for the insiders, like, and we have to kind of navigate and learn
Hmm.
the inside rules as we navigate our way and assimilate. So when it comes to dress code, for me, it's always been kind of more clear cut. It's like, I definitely don't do that. Definitely don't rock the Tims. Don't do that at work. You know what I mean? I won't do that. But I think the most difficult thing for me has been like the expression of self
Mm.
in word with like words and body language.
Yes.
I think those are the most difficult things because body language is very subconscious. Like, granted, I think I've trained myself very well that I can like switch in and out of these spaces, but I think when I'm like more conscious about it, those are the things that I think I can still refine a little bit more. And it almost hurts that I have to like refine it because I'm like, I
Yeah.
know that's not 100% me, but hey, I know that's what's going to get me to the bread. So we do whatever we gotta do for the cheese. But you know what I'm saying? But
Winning by any means necessary.
you damn right, brother. You damn right. Like, so, I mean, I felt like the dress code thing for me was never like a big thing. What about you? Like, you felt like you had to like you
I
got
did.
side eyed and all of that, or nah?
Well, I already dress preppy, so it's not a thing for me unless you
Mm,
see me outside of work or in my dress down clothes, which I'm usually in sweatpants.
right.
So if I'm dressed up, I'm usually dressed preppy for the most part. So it wasn't really that big of a deal there. It wasn't until I started pushing where I would wear all black, and I didn't want to wear polos anymore. I got tired of it.
Mm,
I started to wear a black t-shirt, some black straight Calvin Klein jeans,
mm,
and sneakers every day. So that was the first thing that I started to push in at companies, to start getting out of this space where I have to conform to what they want me to be.
mm.
So I started trying to figure out what is something I feel comfortable in that would be acceptable in a meeting with
Right.
anyone. So I took a look at professionals that I follow, like a Mark Zuckerberg or a Warren Buffett, what were they wearing? Well, you know what? I couldn't follow Warren Buffett on that. I took the Mark Zuckerberg route.
Word.
But I related to him. I related to him, and that's also what made kind of transitioning into that workspace easier because I was able to relate to people like that. That's in these already in these corporate workspaces. So that's why the t-shirt, the pants, um, that's why that worked for me. But kind of to the point that you noted earlier, the speech, things like that, where I would be in a meeting and the way I might speak about something, if I get passionate about it, might be looked at in a negative route, in a
Right.
negative way. So I would have to go back later on and express myself differently to each person individually
Yup.
that might have been in that meeting,
Yup.
which was probably the most annoying part of being black in the workspace. And then also not seeing other people being taken in that looked like me.
Right.
Those are the two hardest things for me in a corporate workspace.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I was gonna say to note about the clothing thing. I know you was definitely King V-neck. He was King Black V-neck with this
Yes.
crisp black V-neck and the black jeans. I definitely remember that with the white sneaks. That was like the Tony special right there. But nah, I mean before and also I definitely don't want to make the conversation sound like morbid, like like oh it's so hard being black in the work environment. Even though there are
Not at all.
challenges, I'm not never going to deny that. It's more so I think just to kind of like touch on some of like the unwritten rules of like folks, kids who are graduating college and they're making their way into corporate. What are some of the things to kind of watch out for? What are some of the things that you should like understand when you're moving into these spaces? Even though they tell you like, hey, you could dress down, but does that really mean you could rock your Timbs? And you like, does that really mean you could do that? Probably not. Like, and I think that's kind of where I want the conversation to kind of head towards. So,
Sure.
with that being said, like, let's start off with, and this is kind of funny, but like I always make jokes about it. Let's start off with like emails. What, like, yo, yo, this is the shit, the type of shit they don't teach y'all in school, man. I lie to you
They
not,
don't.
bro. They don't teach y'all this. But if you, let's just say, like you from Brooklyn, I'm from New York, right? I'm from BX, but let's say we from predominantly black environments, and
Hmm.
we coming into a very professional, very predominantly white institution where they don't really understand our background. We might not necessarily understand their background as much. Um, how do you kind of like break that barrier? And like when you're writing your emails, are there certain things that you kind of look out for?
So when I'm writing my emails, I base it off of the person that I'm sending the email to. So if I don't know a person, I'm going to make it 100% professional. I'm not going to use first names. Typically use the last name, Mr., Mrs., something in that, or Miss, something in that area. Uh, I, and it also depends on what I'm writing about, because if it's something where I need to get something done and someone's holding me up, I will always have to find a nice way to say, I need you to speed this up, because if not,
Right.
I'm gonna have to come down there and you got.
Hey, yo.
But me coming down there wasn't always a bad thing. It's I got used to one of those things where it's like, all right, if somebody's not going to do it right, you do it yourself,
Right.
or you get somebody else to do it. So the first thing I had to do was figure out who I was speaking to, and then I had to look at my position because I had to put myself in different positions at different points in my career to to be able to say certain things to certain people and to be able to do things that wouldn't be usually be allowed as a new hire coming straight out of college.
Right.
So when I coming out of college, I was more timid. I sat back. I let more things walk past me, or more people walk over me in the beginning.
Really.
I would say as a college student coming into the workplace, speak up for yourself, especially as a black college student, because if you don't in the beginning, it will make it tougher as you move forward. So that includes in those emails when you say when you tell someone, "Hey, I need something done," you just have to say it nicely, or I can say with compassion is the way I like to put it. But you want to say it with some assertiveness.
I'm gonna touch on that really quickly because I think that's really interesting. So you said if you, especially a young black dude or a young black woman, speak up with some sort of assertiveness, right? Because you almost
Yes,
have to like kind of stake your claim a little bit. Um,
exactly.
that's a very fine line to like walk.
Hmm.
And so I don't know if you've experienced like so. All right, boom. I do agree with that, but like with caveats. And the reason why I say that is because I feel like my experience has been that, and again, this might be in my own head. I feel like I really am like very conscious of like being depicted as that like angry black dude or
Mm.
as that aggressive black dude. So like the way that I do that, I feel like I typically at work I tend to come off as like more like soft, if you want to call it that. Because like
Mm-hmm.
I really risk, like I don't want to like I really don't want to, I don't want to like overplay my hand where people are like, man, of course, there we go, I already knew. Like I don't know. So like, what do you mean? Like when you say someone needs to be like a little more assertive, like can you explain that a little bit more? Like how would you go about doing that really?
So if you're being overlooked in a meeting where it is your project
Mm,
or something that you've worked on, and I think you working in a tech space and me coming from the financials tech piece,
mm-hmm,
working on both sides, there's always going to be different stages, different parts, and so a lot of times the credit, I felt like a lot of credit
mm,
for black individuals was overlooked unless they had a white counterpart or a white mentorship
mm.
that looked out for them. So when you're in these meetings, you will need to speak up for yourself.
Facts.
And speaking up may not be, hey, that's my project. You don't
Right.
have to stake your claim that way,
Right.
but you may want to ask questions and then you just kind of you want people to say, okay, well, hey, I think you might have a good answer or might have the
Right.
best answer for that.
Right.
So the way I did it was to start showing people that, hey, you're going to need me for this project.
Facts.
So this is mine because you couldn't get this done without me.
Yo, that's a perfect answer. And I say that because like one, like the first example that you kind of gave, and this is funny because we're like iterating through like options, right? And this is
Hmm.
real, y'all. Like, so if you really listening, like stuff like this really does happen. Like kind of what Tony mentioned before is like you can, but like you don't want to just say, hey, this is my project, or hey, I spearheaded this project. Like you want to kind of like plant a seed in people's heads because like corporate is honestly like all a facade. It's all about presence. It's
Yes.
all about perception, the way people perceive you. So to like, I think if I understand what you're saying correctly, Tony, it's basically kind of allude to the fact that like you are a part of this project and you're a vital part of this project, and you could do that by asking questions, or
Hmm.
more importantly, answering like really important questions that people ask. So even if
Hmm.
they pose that question to somebody else, and somebody like stalls a little bit, and you have an opportunity to steal that, like you do that, and you do that not disrespectfully, but you do that in
Hmm.
a way that's like smooth. But you have to do that. If not, they really will like look over you, and you're basically doing work with no credit, and
Yes,
nobody
that
wants
crucial
that.
information.
What happened?
That's crucial information.
Word. But
Yes. If you're not able to answer those questions when you're in a meeting or a workspace, it will show that, okay, well, this person didn't really work on this project. So by you answering those questions, that's telling the exact opposite. Because then people want to know in that room, who is this person? Because
right.
a lot of times when you're doing meetings in the corporate workspace, these these different things are going working their way up. They're always working their way up to the top. So everybody at the top doesn't always know all the people that's towards the bottom. So
Right.
for you to answer a question, for you to ask certain questions that are detailed, in depth about the project, all of these different things will cause individuals to look in your direction and want to know who you were, what was your part in this project, why are you in this room? You need to know why you're in the room when you get there.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Um, yeah, you definitely want to like let people know that you are a part of it, and like also like letting your story be known. Like, and the other thing is, even if you did something that might not be like the heart and soul of the project, or you even weren't necessarily the owner of the project, or you don't feel like you are, if you've
Hmm.
done some kind of work that you feel like was contributed, make sure you speak to that, because if you don't do that, you'll just be silent. You'll be like sidekick. You'll be a sidekick for the rest of like different projects to come. So you want to make sure that like you are able to speak to like, well, I did X, Y, and Z. Whether it's like you cleaned up the data or whatever, you might think that's a simple task, but you did that. Make
Yes.
sure you find a way to kind of input that smoothly, like not in a way that's like cocky, but in a way that's like well, like where I'm in. This is what I understand about the project, and this is where I can be I can be of assistance. So yeah, I think
Mhm.
that's definitely like a really good answer.
And know everything that you do, and also the other part of it too is knowing knowing what your value is, because like you said, if you clean the data, whether you the concept of an idea is also intellectual property. See, I feel like that was one thing that wasn't taught in high school. It was something that was briefly taught in college, but it was something I picked up in the workspace that they don't teach us. Intellectual property. Your idea makes a difference, because if someone goes and builds your idea and they make money off your idea, it was still originally your idea. You bought it to that space. So that's what I'm saying by know your value, know what you did. So you clean the data, that was
That's
your
you.
part in that
Yeah.
project. That's you.
Yeah.
It would That project probably couldn't have been done without cleaning the data.
Word.
Could have been done by somebody else possibly, but
You
it
did
was
that.
you that did
Hmm.
it.
Yeah. No, that's big facts. I'm glad we like. I think we can agree to that. So like kind of going back to like the email part, right?
Hmm.
I saw a meme like a while back. I don't. I was looking for it actually. I don't remember exactly what the wording was, but
Hmm.
it was like a joke. Obviously, it's a meme, but it was saying that kind of the same topic that we're talking about. And it was talking about if you see someone write per my last email, you need to know what that means. Or if you see someone, there's certain like keywords that you kind of have to like look for. I don't know if you ever saw it. It's hilarious. I wish I
Yes,
could
yes,
find it.
I know what you're talking
Yeah,
about.
but those and I was cracking up. But those are facts. Like so, if someone says per my last email, it's basically like in case you forgot. Or it's kind of like not
Hmm.
always you have to be able to read between the lines, but sometimes it is like like a smart remark. It's like, oh, in case you don't know how to read what I just sent you
Hmm.
earlier, this is what I'm talking about. Or
It
it's
was
like
like
I can't remember what the other ones were. If you do,
it was
please
a
go ahead.
few. It was like, let me clarify, or
Yeah,
to
yeah.
clarify, you completely misunderstood my last message, you idiot.
Word.
Something to that extent. Yeah, there's a few in those. I mean, when sending emails, I've gotten in trouble for emails.
Really?
Yes, yes. I've gotten written up at one of my companies before for sending an email, but it wasn't the content of the email. It was just more of the relationship with the person.
Real quick,
So,
is
go
this
ahead.
where you and I worked or nah?
Yes.
Oh man. Oh man.
But you want to hear something? That situation also made me better, because it that situation showed me I don't want to say viewed equally, but it showed me how I was being viewed in the workspace. And it showed me where I needed to push, because an individual was really stressing me, staying on me, micromanaging me, but wasn't my manager. I didn't really have any projects for this person, different things like that. So when we did get put on the same project, I felt it was a simple way to communicate via email. That way I wouldn't have to speak with the person, because I knew we didn't get along.
Mm.
Um, but that email led to the person saying something to me in a negative way that I was truly offended by, but without like getting rowdy, I did yell at the person to leave me alone.
Interesting.
But I didn't say it in a negative way of like, leaving the fuck alone or anything.
Right.
But that's how I felt, and I was still,
This was
but
in
I
person.
ended
You
up
said
getting
that
written
to him,
up.
or through
Yes.
email? Okay.
So the email led the person to come to me, and so one of the things was, hey, you could have came over and said this to me. But me not wanting to say it to the person personally, because I knew our relationship, it was easier for me to send that through email. So sometimes, it's kind of like you see nowadays where people are like, oh, all that could have been put in the email. We didn't really have to have a meeting.
Mm.
It was one of those type of situations. So that's a big part of it, is knowing if you need to send an email. And that's why I
Facts.
say it also goes back to who you're emailing.
Yeah, nah, for sure. I think the person you email is a big part. Like, because I think you even mentioned in the beginning, you have to understand like what your position is and whoever the person you're emailing's position is. You can't
Hmm.
talk. It's like it's like think about it as like in our households. You got your mom and you got your siblings, and there's a certain way you talk to them, and you can't talk to anybody just anyhow. Like, you talk to your friends a certain way, you talk to your mother a certain way, you talk to your older brother a certain, like, it's
Exactly.
levels to it. So it's just kind of like that. And again, it goes back to like the unwritten rules. It doesn't matter how much an organization may say, oh, like, there's no hierarchy here, or like, hey, you could call everybody, you could treat everybody equally. Nah, B,
Yeah.
don't fall for that trap. Like, because at the end of the day, people still have titles. At the end of the day, people still have like, power that they can like really come down on you if they really have to. And you need to understand what your position is and your power over people. So, like, unfortunately, that's just the way
And
it
you
is.
don't, and that power piece you just mentioned, politics. That's
Oh
what that
yeah.
is. You don't, a person could be in
Oh
the
yeah.
same position as you, but you don't know what power they have
Oh yeah.
based on politics. You don't know who they know, so on and so forth. So those are big pieces there. Did you, for yourself, did you learn any of these different things about how to email, how to, I don't want to say code switch, but how to make the transition going into the workspace?
Like, did I learn it?
Yes.
Like
Did
from an
they give you
external
that
source?
background?
Nah,
Did they give you that background in your at your university?
nah, man. I'm To be honest with you, like I think I've just been a master observer since I was a kid. Like
Mm,
I always tell people, like I learned the most just from like looking at people mess up. Like, I've had like a lot of bad role models around me that I was able to like learn a lot. And so like whenever things will happen, I always just study people. Like even when it went back to school, right? Like even like as little as like early as like elementary school or middle school, I just saw, well, I just saw like the treatments that kids get and how they treated based on the way they acted, and way that got them, and I just kind of like
hmm
picked up on it early. It wasn't until like really high school until I really got assimilated into like a really white culture. I was like, oh man, this is crazy. It's like white people, a lot of white people. So, I learned quickly like how to maneuver and how to like really assimilate into a culture based on what I wanted. And so I think it started off for me like based on like learning on what people did. Really, I think I just kind of picked up on it. I mean, it's still like an ongoing refinement, and I'm not perfect at it, but I like to think that I do it really well. But I don't think anybody really taught me, honestly. I think I just kind of picked it up. I think it's surprising for a lot of people who don't really know me. Like, my friends, let's just say my friends in the hood who like if they saw me now, they probably be like, what the fuck? Like, you know what I mean? They'd be like, what the fuck? Yeah, my friends
Yeah.
who know me in a corporate space, if they saw me outside of a corporate space, like, or they saw me how I was before, they probably like, oh shit, So I think it's a line that I've kind of like dabbled in between multiple times. How about you?
For college, no. High school, we they did teach us a little bit. We had a
Interesting.
group, a young men's leadership group where our advisor during that time period, she really supported us and taught us how to do different things in this space. But then once we got to college, they taught us how to get the job. They didn't really teach us how to
Right.
do a job because like when I went to check out my school for orientation, ran into the person that would be my advisor later on down the line. She had let me know. She said, "We're not going to teach you how to do a job because that company's going to teach you how to do the job,
Mm,
but we're just going to teach you how to get we're going to teach you definitely how to get the job." And I actually resonated with that and took that to the workspaces, and I've never really had a problem learning to get a job. That's been a
interesting.
simple piece of the process.
Right.
But then the hard part for me was learning, I don't want to say white, but that's essentially what it is, learning the white vernacular or white verbiage uh, for how to get things done or do certain things while in that workspace by learning their politics. Because
Mm,
in college, we didn't really have politics at my university.
mm-hmm.
It was just kind of, I would say, a free for all. But going into the workspace, politics played a big part.
Yeah. Nah. I mean, I think it kind of like takes me back to like the question that you just asked me, and I think a good answer for that realistically is I think I learned a lot too, just based on like me growing as a person and meeting different people. I think that's really what it was. Like learning about other people's culture and like learning more about white culture and like learning how people act and learning what things that people say and don't say. I think that's really what taught me. So I think that's a good point. Like, yeah, just like learning, like meeting new people. And I think as a person, when you grow as a human being in general, that's a positive thing. You should put yourself in environments that you're not accustomed to or that you're not used to, and that will really grow you as a person in general. So for sure
Yes.
that, yeah.
How was diversity in your school? compared to diversity in your workplace?
Like high school or college?
College, college to your to the your corporate space.
I mean, I would say is I really don't know the raw numbers, but based on the way I felt and the way things that
Hmm.
I saw and experienced, I would say college was definitely more diverse than the
Hmm.
corporate space was. But college was also like clicky. Like, it felt like
Hmm.
University of Delaware just felt like, there was like a section where like black people just all hang out. And then there's like a section where like 90 or whatever percent of white people would just hang out. And then like
Hmm.
all the other small groups. But I just always, I was always cool with everybody. So I just didn't really seclude myself to just like one group. You know what I'm saying? But I think with corporate, it's more so you get like a sprinkle of black people here and there, and it's like the stakes are higher. So I think it's just more
Hmm.
scrutinized. I don't know if that's been the experience, but for sure, I would say it's like definitely less black people in corporate.
I agree. Our numbers dwindle more and more as we move up this
Yeah.
food chain of education, different things like that. Um, and to your point, like you said, the cliquiness in high school, yes, but I was also similar to you. I hung out with everybody. So
Right.
when I got to my workspace, uh, I looked around and I didn't really see anybody. I literally looked. If you stood up, we didn't really have cubicles. You can
Mm-hmm.
see all the way down the hall. So if I
Yeah.
looked all the way down, I didn't see any other black people.
Mm-hmm.
So that was very telling to me. And then I was the only black person on my team globally at every company I've been at. And
Yeah, that's
so
tough.
and if you have offices in Africa, I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, you don't hire at least a black or brown person to be in your office in Africa.
Yeah.
It told me a lot, one, about the company, but two, about the hiring and the managers of the teams.
Nah, that.
Because
Mm-hmm.
if they're supposed to be the one that's making these decisions, it's saying something. So that did for a bit make me feel like a diversity hire.
Mm.
And so when I did feel like that, I realized I didn't have that click that I had in college
Right.
to be around, to express feelings and discuss with. So literally, between myself and a few of the other sprinkles of black people that was at the company, we all got together. We built up a black professional community, and we kept that group strong, whether anybody left the company or not,
Mm.
because you just always want to have that community around you that
Right.
understands, that can relate, where you can always help one another out.
Yeah, and I think to your point, it is very telling of like your managers and hiring people. Um, I think I don't want to say every company probably needs it, but I think a lot of companies could benefit from having these groups.
Hmm.
Of people who share the same background, share the same culture, but not just limited to those people. Of course, it should be open to everybody, but just
Yeah.
as a central support system, for people who might need that. I think it's definitely important, and I've definitely benefited from groups like that, in different groups different parts of my life. So I think that's very important. It also brings me to like the point of the whole HBCU versus PWI, of like
Hmm.
people who transition from HBCUs, which are historically black universities, into
Hmm.
like corporate spaces that are predominantly white. I feel like they typically don't do as well, and it's not because they're not as smart or they don't get it. I think it's just because again the communication piece, the culture is different,
Hmm.
and like that whole thing that it's almost like relearning something else, learning how to like communicate with somebody, learn how to share your ideas, learn how to be a professional, whatever that means to someone else who might not understand the way you see professionalism. I
Hmm.
think all of that plays in part as to like maybe why some people from HBCUs don't really do well when they go into corporate.
So how did you get to your first corporate role? What brought you to that company?
What brought me so good question. Actually, I'm not gonna shout out his name, but so essentially, me in my senior year, I was like looking for a couple of jobs. I was fortunate to get some, and then one of my boys actually was actually working on a project who is white. Help, like we were working on a project together. He was telling me about like a job he just applied for. He was like, "Yo, I think you probably be really good for this role." Like, You should check it out. And I was like, oh, word, I'm gonna check it out. So he introduced me to like the hiring manager, the hiring recruiter, or whatever. We met. I hit it off with her. Like it was a good connection. I learned a little more about the company. I was like, this sounds like it's gonna be dope. So I got in through that way, which kind of ties back into like us talking about like meeting different people who are not from the same backgrounds that you and being comfortable. Like,
Hmm.
and I think that's very telling because I was fortunate enough to be able to grow my network, or even be fortunate enough to be cool enough with people who are not in the same backgrounds that I'm in. Just like my boy
Hmm.
was able to also like open his horizons to be around people that he's not used to. Because trust me, that's my boy too. We've had conversations about like his upbringing, and like he's very white suburban. You know what I mean? Like neighborhood, like you know what I mean, like where he grew up, not meeting and seeing black people. But I had a similar upbringing. Growing up in New York, like where it's like we didn't really have a lot of white people. So us like kind of like wanting to, I don't want to say wanting to, but like us having the share world of like learning about people, each other's culture, and like just being like normal human beings. You know what I'm saying? Like kind of brought that apart, about. So that's sort of my experience, I guess, from a very high level. I mean, of course, there are like thought processes that even made me think about going into a company, and going to college and going to corporate. But
Hmm.
what about you? Like, I guess like I want to focus on like, did you even want to go into corporate after you graduated college?
Honestly, I didn't really know what I wanted. I didn't really know what I wanted to do after college exactly. I just knew I wanted to use language. I wanted to travel. Um, and one of the things was when I looked up my major, when you're back then looking up your major, I also graduated in 2012 towards the end of the financial crisis. So jobs was also scarce, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I was looking at being a translator. I looked at working at embassies, so on and so forth. So at some point, I felt that my language skills would push me one way or the other into a corporate workspace. Um, I ended up just literally applying online to a secondary company, a temp agency, when I first got back,
Mm-hmm.
and that's what actually brought me to that company. Uh,
Interesting.
so me applying to that temp agency with my background, it was, I guess, to them showed, hey, corporate background. They send your resume out, so on and so forth.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's interesting too. Like it sounds like you almost kind of like cold applied. I think is how they call it,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
I guess like my experiences in all the jobs that I've kind of gotten, realistically, has been me like really networking with people, and like
Hmm.
trying to like kind of get close to people who I know might have you know uh, good connection, or might know somebody who might know somebody, and then being able to like connect with them. I think that's kind of like that's been my journey so far. And I mean, I don't know if there's a better way to do it, but I mean, I would argue that like definitely connecting with people, if you are planning on going to corporate, is definitely like network with people. And typically, the people that we go and
For
network
sure.
with probably not going to look like you, because realistically, there's not a lot of black people in corporate. At least not enough. That's not as many as there should be, right?
Hmm.
So that's going to require you as a black person, like to wisen up and be like, if that's what you really want to do, to like kind of build these connections with these people who are already in those positions. And that goes for like not even just corporate, even to starting your business, or
Hmm.
doing whatever. Because I know Tony, you and I be talking about entrepreneurship, opportunities and stuff like that. But
Yes.
you just leverage people who are in those spaces or have a foot in the door, and you know that you can leverage their skills and their knowledge and their network, so you get yourself in the right place, right?
Yes.
So that's what I would say with that
you
for
know
sure.
to that, I mean, like you said, getting to know people, but for any college students listening, there's no one right way.
Hmm.
Like I
Yeah.
would other roles I've received have been from recruiters or companies reaching out to hire me. I will say that when moving on to my second role, one of the things that I started to look at was benefits and pay.
Mm,
And so now I'm like, oh, okay, I'm making a lot more pay now. Now I'm like, okay, well, benefits. All right.
right.
So now I'm looking at the corporate culture as a whole.
Mm,
Do I feel comfortable? With the pandemic, it's kind of hard now because you can't just you can't request to walk through the workspace to
mm-hmm.
see if you feel comfortable there.
Yep.
So these are important things. But like I said, definitely there's no one right way, but talk to recruiters, talk to your contacts. You
Yeah.
never know. Your best friend's parent could
Facts.
be could be the person you need to talk to.
No, that's big facts. I mean, and I think what you said is really, really important because even the fact of you like going into corporate, right? It's not you shouldn't think of it as like them really accepting you. You need to think about it
Mhm.
as like a mutual relationship. Like it's not free. You're
Yes.
doing a work for a wage, right?
Hmm.
So you're doing a job for a wage, and so you need to understand. You need to make sure that you are going to be comfortable with the environment, like you kind of mentioned. You need to be make sure that you're going to be comfortable with the culture. Don't just be give. I mean, and I know it's really difficult for people who are probably like fresh out of college looking for a job. You're like, I just want to find a job. But you need
Hmm.
to make sure that like that job is gonna be something that's like you're so gonna be at ease for. Like you need to make sure that it's like you need to ask them questions like, hey, like so what do you guys think about this, and what do you guys do for this, and what is the culture here like, and you need to ask some questions that are important to you or you know. And so I think with that, that's another thing to definitely keep in mind when you're transitioning to college, transitioning
Retention.
from college into corporate for sure.
Yeah.
Um,
So retention. So I think to that point, retention is that's the piece. So you want to make sure that you want to stay at a company.
exactly. Perfectly
That's
said.
really what it is. And I
Perfect.
think going back to talking about how we got to the corporate workspace, I look at recruiting because that was one of the big things that I did while working in corporate was started working with recruiting, trying to get more black and brown people into corporate.
Mm-hmm.
It and it wasn't limited to just black people. So my goal was just to get anyone that wanted to be there that was passionate about the job that they would be doing,
Mm-hmm.
about the people to come to the company. But then if I saw someone that looked like me, it did make me more passionate about having that person come in the building and make sure that they had everything they needed because I did like I noted earlier, I felt that I was everything was even for me because of my work. But I did feel that I had to show my work just to feel just to feel on the same page with
Right.
everybody else. And so I would equate that to being comfortable to having to always work two times harder. In college I had to work I didn't have to work two times as hard in terms of getting good grades, but I had to
Mm-hmm.
work two times as hard to be comparable
Right.
to my peers. In the workspace, I had to do the same thing until my work was recognized. Once, that's why it goes back to, knowing what you bring to the table, things like that. Once your work is recognized, once people understand what you can bring to the table, they will respect you. They will respect you for that. And they'll also know that, hey, I can call this person in that space.
Right.
But with recruiting, you don't really know what you're going to get with a college student.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
as a black college student, you don't really know what you're going to get from these workplaces. So how do you when you get in the building, you got to figure out, okay, well, hey, can I dress down, or can I leave my hair natural, or do I need to straighten it? Do I you know Who do I speak to? Am I allowed to congregate with black people, or am I not? I say that because that was a real
Yeah.
thing for me.
No, that's a
um,
real thing. But I think you like to your point. You also have to understand like what are you willing to budge on, what are you not willing to budge on.
mhm,
Like for me, wearing my hair the way I was going to wear my hair was not something I was willing to budge on. And I'm not even just saying that
mm.
just to say that. Like, if you're not going to hire me because of the way my hair looks, I probably don't want to work for you anyhow. You know what I
I've
mean?
heard
Like,
people say that.
it's not like I'm keeping my hair unkept. It's just the way I like to wear my hair. That's natural for me. It's not unprofessional. Um, but so like I think that's definitely something that you have to decide. And to your point about like colleges not really knowing what they're gonna get from a student and students not knowing really what they're gonna get from a job, that's true. However, I think here the scales are like best placed in the students' hands because you can really do
Mm,
research and you should do research. You should like get to know what it's like on the inside. Like you mentioned, if you can, I know maybe not right now because of COVID. Go into
mhm.
the office, see what the office is like. Ask to go in the office if they offer that. If not, meet with people who are in the office and ask them what it's really like, and see if you really like that or not. But I mean, I think
Yes.
those are all like really important things to kind of decipher whether you really want to be at that company or not. And hey, maybe it might be something that you really don't want to do, but you need it right there for the money. You just understand that you're gonna have to have an exit strategy. Are you there just like learn a couple skills and then
Hmm.
dip, or are you just there to like really be there for like the long term? Those are things that you also need to
That's very true.
keep in
I'll
account.
make sure wherever you go is always take something from it,
Oh
whether
yeah,
that be lessons, knowledge, you got your college paid for, or something.
facts.
But yeah, also, and I think I wouldn't always put it also always on the students because one of the things I noticed when I started working in corporate, none of the companies at any time were recruiting at HBCUs. That was a big thing,
Hmm.
and there was articles about it like I think what 2015,
Okay.
and just like why they don't hire us. They were talking about HBCU engineers and things like that. So you hear all of these different things about black students not getting jobs, but that's a lot of times because these companies don't go to our universities.
Right.
And then if they go to our universities, I've heard students from Spelman, students from Morehouse, students from all HBCUs all over say that this company X will send over someone that doesn't look like me.
Right.
And so that was telling to them, so they don't even want to even go to that company because one, you'll send somebody that doesn't look like you if you come, or they just don't come at all. And
Yeah.
so that's saying like the companies aren't changing what they need to do fast enough, or changing what they need to do on their end at all, to say, all right, well, we need to hire black people, and we can, or Hispanic, because there's a lot of cases of that as well. And bring, and also have, not just have them as a token in their company, but have people in your recruiting team, have a diversity team that is actually interactive, not just with students but with the employees as well.
For sure.
So I don't know if how long have you been in the corporate workspace?
I've been well. I mean, I've been working. I don't. It depends on what you want to call corporate, but let's just say 2.5 years to be like solidly like up like upper echelon corporate. But before that,
Okay.
I've worked in other corporate spaces. But what do you call it? I think to your point, really quickly, though, is like I do agree that like companies need to do better. I think the reason why I emphasize that like it's really in the students' hands is because we understand that companies are not really doing as they're not doing as much as they should. They're trying. A
Hmm.
lot of companies are, but you need to understand, as someone who is going for yours, don't depend on them to do that. You need to do that
Hmm.
research, and you need to make sure you're putting that in your own hands. I do agree that like companies definitely like, and I think companies are doing better now. Like for sure, like even recruiting at HBCUs, like that's crazy that we don't even do that. But again, it's like the idea of like it's not a place that you look. It's not because you think those kids are not good. It's just because you don't even think they even look there, right? As a
Hmm.
corporate, as a HR group.
But there's a reason why. It's like that's why they need to have these diversity teams and things like that,
Absolutely,
because they say,
absolutely.
what is it, diverse companies,
Do better.
they have higher revenues,
Yeah.
stronger profits. So
No, for sure.
yeah.
And I think companies are learning that now too, right? But and to your point about, I think it's a really good point about like having, even if you do have recruiters go to HBCUs or predominantly black schools, and they send someone who doesn't look like the people. The issue I think a lot of people don't really understand is like the issue is not because, well, you just don't look like me. I don't think that's just the
Hmm.
issue. Like the problem is that people don't really relate to who you're sending to them. And again, it kind of
Hmm.
goes back to the real reason why we're here, the communication piece and assimilating to it. If
Hmm.
you like, let's say you recruiting from, I don't know, company, I don't even want to call no company names, but you recruiting from like some top tech company. If you are in a black family, right, in your head, you probably already have like three big top tech companies that you're thinking of. You probably thinking of like, I'm not gonna call no names, like three big probably tech companies. So somebody
Hmm.
comes to you and they like, well, I know about this really dope tech company that's like, really doing well, but they might be a little more low key. It's not even going something. It's not even something that you might has even been on your radar. So you need someone to be able to break down to you as to like why this is an important thing for you to do or an important thing for you to consider, and be able to explain to you what it is that they really do. And if you come with somebody like some Bob Johnson, who's from a very complete opposite background from a Dylan or a Daquan, like you know what I mean, it's going to be there's going to be a clash, not a clash necessarily, but they might not necessarily understand each other as much as they could. So I think naturally the piece why we're like emphasizing that like it would probably be more beneficial if you have someone who can at least speak to the people that they're speak resonate with. I mean, like relate with the people that they're speaking to. I
The reason
think.
I say that for also the reason I say that for the HBCUs and companies going to HBCUs is then that also, like, yes, college students should do that work to research companies and
Mm-hmm.
so on and so forth, but a lot of times you may not know some companies, some they're new companies,
Facts.
like, but beyond that, then it's also that black college students have to do twice the work because nobody's coming to
Absolutely.
them. They
Absolutely.
only come to PWIs.
No.
and
Mm-hmm.
it's growing. I'm not gonna say it's not changing, but it's kind of like where I read the other day, someone had said when it comes to diversity, companies always say the word try. We're gonna try to do better. We're gonna try to hire more. It's that's we're done with just trying. We're not in a place where there's not enough educated students. There's not enough HBCUs. That's all there.
Mm-hmm.
Everything is there. So that's why I put more of that emphasis on the companies than I do putting it on black and brown students. Um, just because these companies really do need to come and do and put in their effort. If these
Yeah.
students going to put it in, companies need to as well.
Yeah, and I totally agree with you, and I think maybe this is a kind of like a broader conversation or a more
Hmm.
specific conversation. I don't think we might not necessarily agree at the moment because I do agree to the fact that like companies do need to do that for sure. Don't get me wrong. I, I guess I'm also like a realist and I understand like the way that things are and like what that entails for someone who's looking for an opportunity. Like, yeah, it sucks. It really does, and I'm hopeful that companies will get better at like their recruiting pools and in the people that they're sent as representatives. To be honest,
Hmm.
because that's also another thing, right? Like a lot of times you'll get companies who will come spit game at you and be wary. Young students be wary because they it's all cap. It's straight cap, though. They straight capping, though. Like you gonna go up and they think you about to go do some crazy work, like you about to go do some cutting edge work, and then you come to find out like you doing customer service, dog. Like you know what I mean? Like you don't want to do that.
Hmm.
Like, and I know people who have been in those positions, so beware of that. But yeah, I mean, I guess as a good as a good point of like of agreeing, I guess is basically that put two and two together. Make sure you're taking advantage of the schools, the companies that are coming to your school, and make sure you're doing as much research as you can about those companies as well, and other
Yes.
companies that you might not necessarily know too much about.
Yes.
Yeah.
I asked earlier how long you've been in the corporate space because one of the things that I look at is integration and into corporate and how just anyone of that is not white is brought in. How do you feel when you walk in the door? Do you feel the assistance provided to you from your other coworkers or the company in general? Was it helpful for you to feel comfortable and assimilate smoothly? Like what was your transition into the workspace? Like your first 2 or 3 weeks on your team?
I mean, I don't want to speak to my. I mean, like I can speak to my experience, right? Like, so basically, I think you're asking me like, how did I feel, right? Like when I walked in.
Yes.
I mean, and again, it kind of goes back to, I already knew what to expect in a sense. Like not exactly, but I knew what it was going to kind of be like because one, I took the time to like really learn about the place I was going to be working at. Like I really did take the time to like go in there, see what the spaces are like, talk to the people as much as I could, and I understood what it was kind of going to be like to a certain degree. So I guess I didn't get too much of a shock, and I was also fortunate to be placed with like somebody who was like I worked with someone who was senior and black, and so that
Hmm.
was like a profound, pivotal like thing for me because they was able to like kind of show me the game without like really telling me, hey, this is the game. They was just kind of like I just kind of watched the way they moved, and I learned a lot from them. Um, but so like my experience has been times where it's been like weird and a lot of things that I had to learn. But overall, I'm grateful. I'm grateful that I had to like learn those things. I think the biggest things was definitely like the politics. I don't know about you. Like, did you feel weird when you walked in? Did you feel like uncomfortable and
Yes, I've definitely felt out of place. I had to think about that. Like, damn. Like, yeah, I really did feel out of I felt out of place, but I felt that I was comfortable enough in my ability to show them that I belong
Right.
here,
Right.
and that's what I did. But I realized it wasn't until I started getting like myself and a few others, we all started getting the sprinkles of black people together and then
The sprinkles of Jesus. Oh my God.
yes, the sprinkles of black people together to make this dark spot, and
Oh my, yo,
I'm
you
gonna use it as a dark
bugging.
spot. I'm using this analogy on purpose, not to be rude to my culture, but just to say that this dark spot is on this company's books and this in this company in general. So
Hmm.
when people come into the company, they see like, oh, you only have a sprinkle of black people, and they know you got a sprinkle of black people,
Right.
and they're honest with us. But like you said, honesty from the companies. Like I know that I used to recruit as well. When recruiting, that honesty actually is what brought a lot of black people to the
Yep.
company because they knew, like you said, you knew what you felt like you knew what to expect when you walked into the company. When during recruiting, being able to provide this information, I provided people the actual real. And when
Hmm.
they got the real, they're like, damn, I don't like this. But a majority of them still chose the company.
Right.
One is for the money, and then the other part is for the education.
Right.
And then but they knew when they got there, they had a goal. They knew what they were coming for. And like you said, if a company doesn't give you that stuff, it's not going to
Yeah.
be helpful.
I
So,
I do want to say I knew what I was coming into. Like, I want to use that term loosely, like very loosely. Like, I for sure did feel uncomfortable at times. I did feel out of place, but like
mhm,
my point is, I knew it was gonna be predominantly white. So
mhm,
like I had to like, again, it goes back to the code switching. I knew I had to like switch over to that side. You know what I mean? Like shift over a little bit. So there are a lot of things that I didn't know, and things that I don't really want to share, to be honest with you.
mhm,
But that's something we could talk offline about. But
mhm,
there are things that I had to learn, and I'm grateful for going through those learning pieces. But those
mhm,
things are not, they're not general. They're specific to my experience. Um, but at the same token, one thing that you mentioned, I think is really, really important is the fact that you helped out with recruiting. And I've done that, and I still continue to do that. And I think that's especially important for black professionals because,
yes,
one, like, and again, it goes to like us being as black people. We need to get into the mentality of when we get on, we need to be able to help put other people onto the bag. And
mhm,
I strongly believe that. Like, whether it's a job you got, whether it's a business, whether it's you supporting a friend with a business, whatever it is, I'm all for that. Like, I will help you as much as I can in my power, my ability to help put you on with whatever I know, with however I can. And so it was always important for me, like since day one, to be like, all right, we have a black problem. Like, if we had a black problem at a company, like, okay, this retention is an issue or the pipeline is an issue. How can I help? And like by
mhm,
me helping to show my face and you kind of saying you gave people the real, doing that, and just like putting people in connections with people that they probably otherwise wouldn't have, right?
mhm,
Those things are really, really crucial for any black professional. So don't even think you're new. If it's like your first year, of course you want to buckle down, like for the first couple of months and learn your actual job. But as soon as you feel like you comfortable with your core role and your responsibilities, please make it like I won't say mandatory, but definitely make it a part of your day job to like help put other black people on because that's super important. And I know
yes.
Tony, like I don't even like I know you've done that. I know you've done that. Like I guess my question is like, what are some of the best ways people could do this?
So I'm gonna tell you how I was told. Actually I went to a black underwriting firm to learn some information for data, and when I got there, the I was actually speaking with someone higher up. He was a Latino gentleman,
Mm-hmm.
and he actually introduced me to a black gentleman from the area that I was from. And this individual gave me a lot of information. He said to me, he was like, when you guys work to get other black people into the workspace, one of the things you want to do is help them get to the interview point. All right. Once they get to that interview point, help them get into the door. Once they get in the door, once they get past the door, help them to assimilate into that culture.
Yeah.
These three things were very strong. And then it doesn't even stop there. So always check up on each other. to make sure that you guys are always good, because that's also one way to build your relationship and keep these relationships and continue them even after you or that other individual left the firm.
Right.
So those were the four things altogether that we would do. Just help from the interview process. So that could be giving the real, that could be letting them know like, hey, this is what you need to look at. This is what you need to know when you're gonna try to come to this company. All right, they got to the interview process. If they may need you for a recommendation, if and it's not to say just choose to recommend anybody for a role,
Mm-hmm.
but it's if you see that there is a young man or young woman that's out here trying to get this role, assist them.
Right.
If it's not going to kill you for 2 seconds to put your name on something, if you see that a person is actually putting effort forth,
Facts.
that and you want to see that same effort in the firm, once they get in the company, make sure they have the right contacts. Make sure sometimes when you go to a company, you may understand your job, but you may not understand how to do all your tasks and efficiently,
Mm-hmm.
because there's all these little tips and tricks that people at different firms may know just because they've been there. And sometimes you might have a manager that might have high expectations, especially from college students nowadays. I feel like there are a lot higher expectations from them. But with these high expectations, there are tricks that these managers or somebody may know, and if they're not shared, make sure you go and try to help that person with whatever information you can share.
Yeah.
It could be just, and also could just be having lunch with a person to build bonds and relationships, so that they may find somebody that does know, because you may not be on the same area or team, but it's allowing them to increase their network, not just with other black people, but just in general. And like I said, that's also part of that building relationship piece and continuing it.
Yeah, nah, for sure. I think that's beautiful, man. I think the four steps that you kind of gave were definitely important. A lot of people typically lose the last step of like retention and letting people stay there. So that's
Hmm.
beautiful. I do want to say I think we've been talking for like over an hour, man. But like just to kind of keep this a little digestible for people at a good length. Real quick, like if you had like four takeaways, I would say like if you had a couple takeaways that you wanted to give for people listening to this, especially young professionals who are graduating from college, ready to like go into corporate, like what would you say to them? What are the things that like kind of focus on and like really make sure you master?
For the college students, I would say number one, know what you bring to the table. Number two, know your environment. Number three, network, network, network.
Mm-hmm.
uh, and then number four, I would say is to always continue learning, as well as unlearning, because
Yeah.
there are going to be things that and it's not to say about life, but just information in general, because it's always changing.
Right.
So always be able to learn and unlearn and relearn.
I like that. The unlearn and relearn, I really like that. I think, and an easy way to like unlearn and relearn, I think, is just make sure you meet other people, man. Like, make sure you
Hmm.
put yourself in positions that you're not comfortable in. Like, if you're not used to talking to some Asian person, like from who's like, and I don't mean Asian American, like someone who's from like Korea or someone who's from China, like talk to them, try to communicate with them however you can, and like learn different cultures. Cause I promise you, people's cultures are beautiful, man, and like you'll learn so much from it, and
Hmm.
you'll be able to like teach them and break barriers and break stereotypes and build connections and build networks seamlessly, like in ways that you never even thought was possible. So start doing that while you're in college is the best place to do it. People from all over around the world are coming to school and learning, and I would say definitely take advantage of that. Another thing is like when you go to corporate, man, understand them dudes are gangsters. I'm not even bullshitting, man. Like,
Yes,
yo,
they are.
they are, man, and like they are sneaky. Motherfuckers will stab you. It's like Game of Thrones out there, man. People will stab you in the fucking back. People will like act
Hmm.
like they're your friends, but they're not. Like you have to learn all of that. Like it's the same hood rules. It applies, but
Hmm.
in a weird way that you're not used to. So just be privy to that and like watch out for that. I don't mean to make it sound like it's a scary place or nothing like that. Y'all be alright, but you know, keep your eyes open.
Uh, and just before we head off on a higher note, how
Hmm
was that salary though, coming from college to corporate?
Yo, that joint, like, you know what I mean? I'm not going to lie. My salary was, we're not going to speak on it, but it's
But was it nice? How did you feel with it?
like It was good. It was great. And it was the most
Hmm.
I haven't handled money like that before in my life. So
Exactly.
it was definitely good money. But for me, in the to be honest with you, aspirations that I had, like for me, it was like I just understood, like okay, like this is just the beginning. Like jobs nowhere near done, and
Hmm.
there's something that I feel like we never even really talked about, which is unfortunate, is like the black tax of black
Hmm.
people when we graduate college, and like the black tax for anybody who don't know is like your mama, your daddy, your family, y'all don't got money like that. So you being the person who graduate college, now you gotta take care of mine. Like you gotta try to support everybody, but you try to support yourself at the same damn time. And you know what I mean?
Hmm.
Like the money is not really, it's really dwindling. So it's like you need to be able to like eliminate all of that noise since we get into the money of it. And I think maybe that's a different episode we can have. It's like the black tax, really, because that's a really
Hmm.
important thing, how to like really handle that and navigate that, because it's just unfortunate, our other counterparts, typically our white counterparts, don't really have that, because they typically get the opposite of that. They get inheritance. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? Where we get the tax, where it's like you got the bread, but you got to look out for your community, which is not a bad thing. It's a great thing. It teaches you character,
Hmm.
teaches you humility, but it does diminish the wealth in the black community, which is unfortunate and it sucks. But I don't mean to end up on a low note. So on a
No,
high
I
note,
don't think that's a low note. I think it's at the same time that black tax also helps keep our communities going for other,
for
for
sure,
some people that can't make it to the level that we're at or can't do, some of the things that we do at times.
for sure.
So, and for any college students, if you are, whenever you're looking for work, different things like that, um, you know, make sure that you're always looking on these different websites. Uh, I don't want to plug anyone in particular, but there's a lot of websites out there. And if you want to get a good idea of certain workspaces and how crazy corporate can get, and like Isaac was saying about being bullies and gangsters, yeah, check out Industry on HBO, a leading black woman, and I felt that show.
I gotta peep that, because I'm sure it's all facts in there too.
Yes, yes. So,
Word.
but
But yeah, man, appreciate that plug-in, man. And again, I think that is the strength that we have as black people. It's like our family and like our resilience to be able to hopefully be there for one another. And we're just gonna continue growing in that sense. But Tony, I just want to say, on that note, thank you so much for being here, brother. Really appreciate you, man.
no
I
problem.
think
Thank you for having me.
absolutely anytime, man. I think that's a conversation that more of our young brothers and sisters need to hear, especially those who are transitioning to a different stage in their lives, whether they starting businesses or even going to corporate. I think it's important to hear this. Um, for our listeners, thank you for listening. As always, it's a pleasure. Make sure you check us out on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, wherever you listen to your podcasts on. Also, check us out on Instagram and Facebook at Mentality Radio. And until next time, we'll catch y'all later. Deuces.